Greetings, friends, and welcome to Contemplative Light in Our World. We're going to have this interview on our YouTube page, obviously, but also on our podcast, which is the Contemplative Light podcast. And I wanted to say a quick alert that both I and the executive director have books out. My book is called Preparation for Great Light, and I'll put a link below in the show notes. It's about 6 months I spent living in a Benedictine monastery. And our executive director, Marc Thomas Shaw, has a book out, Dante's Road, which actually won the Nautilus Book Award, which is a very prestigious prize that Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson have been previous winners. So you can check out Preparation for Great Light by Clint Sabom, Dante's Road by Marc Thomas Shaw. And with all that said, we have a great interview guest today. And I want to welcome Barbara to our universe. And welcome, Barbara. So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Clint. I've been looking forward to this. I'm just really excited to be here with you.
Great, great. And I guess let's just start off for listeners that aren't really familiar with you and your story. Could you maybe give a little bit of background?
I'm happy to. I mean, it's a complicated story, but one that has brought me through different belief systems and to where I'm currently at in my belief system, which I'm sure is still evolving. If I could say I have still no absolute answers, but I was born into a large family. I was the ninth of 11 girls and born in St. Louis. We lived in the projects. We were very poor. When I was 3, our family fell apart, and the older sisters, which back then you married very young, were married and out of the home. And back then you didn't have a car, no internet, none of these things that we have today. So they were kind of isolated from the rest of the family. When our family fell apart, we ended up in an Italian Catholic orphanage, the younger kids. And I had my first peak experience in that orphanage. I have to preface it with first, my older sisters were pretty devastated by this. You can't imagine. They understood what was going on. At 3 and a half, I didn't know. And I loved my sisters so much, and they gave me so much care and joy that it didn't matter to me where we were. I was with them, so life was good. But it was Christmas. It was the coldest winter in St. Louis in years. It was Christmas time, and we had a small chapel in that orphanage. And I was all excited by the stories of the Christ child coming and being laid in the manger. And I was so excited about this. This is all Christmas could mean, possibly. What else could it mean based on my experience there? So I wanted to wait up for midnight mass and see the coming of the Christ child, right? But I fell asleep. And I was so angry that they let me sleep through this. But then they woke me up and brought me in the chapel. And there was still singing. The nuns sang like angels. There was a smell of incense in the air and the bells ringing during the whole setup at my young age, looking at the tinsels just hung just perfectly in line and shimmering. I had a peak experience of one with everything. And it was just everything melted into one. And the peace and joy that I experienced there at 3 and a half, almost 4, what did I know? I just knew, oh, wow, this was just absolutely beautiful. And I share that experience because I believe it helped me get through some pretty tough times in my life. Because eventually, as life would have it, we were fostered out, and I lost my sisters. Then that was my trauma. I lost them. That was very hard for me. So one sister and I were placed in foster care together, and this is very funny, and it shows these obstacles come into your life probably for purpose as you look back, but during their occurrence, you kind of have to wonder. But we were placed in the home of a mafia grunt and grew up there. Yes. Back then, they didn't do much screening for foster care. They were Italian, and we were in an Italian orphanage. So off we went to live this just awful life with this mafia grunt and everything that could be entailed in that. However, this peak experience stuck with me. And when I was really little, maybe 6 or so, I was listening to the priest, because we obviously raised Catholic at that point, telling me that Jesus loved me and would be with me forever, right? So I went to sleep that night and prayed that Jesus would come to me and protect me from this awful guy that we're living with. It just very, very abusive in every way imaginable. And I had this dream that Jesus did come to me, put me on his lap and held my hand and said not to fear, he would be with me forever. When I woke up, my hand at 6-year-old, I knew my hand was still so warm in my mind. That was from being held in the hands of Christ. And that got me through pretty much the rest of my childhood. So the importance of grace just flowing on a young child. I mean, I didn't know how to ask for grace, although I did ask for the experience, right? But, it just kind of got me through. And what it left me with for a lot of my life was the ability to know things, that premonition of knowing things. So that's an important point. As I wrote in my book, Broken Water, I searched for my entire life in ways that I possibly could as a child to find my sisters. Never could. All women, no internet. Remember, no DNA, no ancestry.com, none of that. So, you were limited into ways you could find lost relatives. I wrote Oprah. She ignored me sadly. But I wrote, talk show hosts used to help reunite families, but that didn't work. Anything I tried didn't work. I hired a detective when I was an adult. That didn't work until one day I had a premonition. And I could describe the whole environment when it happened, but it could happen anywhere, right? And I felt like someone just shook me and said, if you wanted to find your sisters, why didn't you just ask? And in that moment, I knew, and I was in my 40s by then, Clint. I knew my sisters were going to find me, that my search was over, that they were going to find me. I also knew they were going to find me in 3 days. The significance of three in world religions, it's just, incredible in the wholeness of the number 3. So sure enough, we were going on a trip to the beach on the Delaware shores. This was August of 97, I believe. And we got to the beach, and on the 3rd day, I'm out on the beach really early that morning, just watching the sunrise and feeling very excited that this miracle is going to occur. I knew it like I'm talking to you right now. I just knew it. A few seconds later, our little townhome was right on the boardwalk there that we had rented. My husband calls me in, and I ran into that townhome so fast because I knew. And he came in and he told me to sit down. And I said, they found me, didn't they? He said, how did you know? So the power of these premonitions that, come along, I think are acts of grace that just fall upon you if you're receptive to knowing these things. So we all got together. That's been since I say 97. After we were together for a few years, they asked if I would write their stories down. And I loved them so much I couldn't say no. But it took me 15 years to get them all down the way they were supposed to be written. And it didn't go the way I had anticipated, like, should a book be written about them in chronological order or something like that. And I decided to just use my intuition, that premonition that you can have, that connection that we all have, and follow that. And it didn't make any sense that I would visit sisters in the order that I did, except that, for example, the first sister I visited for a week to capture her story was the first to die. I would have missed it. I would have missed it if I tried to plan this book in my own way, in my own, like, well, it would only make sense to do eldest to youngest or youngest to eldest. And that happened with 3 more sisters in the same way. I had the gift of being with them 10 days before they died or a day before they died, that I knew following this was so important. And so that's the whole story in a nutshell of where I have found myself today.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, that's fantastic to be led so much by God. And
Mhm.
I'm curious though. I'm
Mhm.
curious about the intense trauma you experienced as a child. Now, did the peak experiences and knowing Jesus was with you just carry you through that, or have you had to deal with a lot of that trauma in adulthood? And how has that affected your journey?
It helped me get through when I remembered, but I think the world has a way of taking us away from the remembrance of God. And I forgot often. And when I did forget, even in my childhood, by the time I was 14, I didn't want to live anymore. I actually asked our foster father, please just shoot me, get it over with, you know? And for some reason, it scared him when I asked him to do that, and he left me alone from then on. So, I was able to kind of I took all my memories, put them in my mind, and I say I'm a very visual person, use metaphor a lot, but I built this dungeon in my mind with really strong bars, and I put all my memories in there and guarded it so that I could kind of have a normal life for a while. But as we all know, eventually these memories come out and need to be dealt with. So I was blessed to have some amazing therapists. I had a Hindu therapist and a Maori tribe from New Zealand therapist, which opened my mind to other ways of thinking about things other than my Catholic upbringing. Though I retained some of the Catholicism in me, I'm a ministerial counselor that I counsel all faiths, all religions, or no religion. And I see the light in all of them. So to me, that they're all the same. We're all the same. And the way we find our way back to remembrance is what I call it. It's by having someone reflect that light back to our eyes so we see it and remember. I was lucky enough to have two of the most magnificent therapists do that for me. And it took years to get through the amount of trauma that I experienced as a child. But through that process, it was like a waking up, clearing out my brain, making that dungeon a beautiful place, like a Garden of Eden, that grew new and beautiful things in my brain. And I'm pretty convinced that the physics of it, I did grow new neuronal pathways in my brain, the happiness factor, by being able to clear that all out. So it's just fortunate, really blessed.
Yeah, yeah, that's really fantastic. I know a lot
Mhm.
of people just that have been through
Oh,
things as you've been through will carry that trauma all,
I
their
know.
lives. And yeah, having good therapists uh
Yeah.
definitely helps.
Yeah.
You mentioned being a ministerial counselor.
Hmm.
Is that your current occupation? And could
It,
we talk a little bit about that?
of course we can. When I went through therapy, I was struggling with learning, and I think it was all emotional. I had a hard time reading, just learning numbers. And one day in a therapy session, I just felt different in my brain, and I could read. And I mean, I couldn't get out of the bookstore. I couldn't get out of the library. I was like a kid in a candy store. Give me more to read. Give me more to read. I want to learn. I want to learn. So with that, I decided to go back to school based on my therapist's support. I'm like, you need to go back to school. You thought you were not very smart. You were in school. They told you you were the R word, which I won't repeat. I believed them. None of this is true. Go to school. So I went to undergrad and got um, my degree in human behavior and social science, 4.0 Phi Kappa Phi. I had to prove to myself the R word was a lie. Then I went on for my master's in family psychology with a focus on child abuse. And then I wanted a way to bring that spiritual element into my work. I have many friends and cohorts who are psychologists and fantastic therapists. Um, yet, and they can hint at the spirituality, but they can't really delve into it legally in their states, you know? So I thought, oh, I really want to do that. So I found this beautiful program, Pathways of Light. That's a 2-year program. It's what took me anyway, 2 years to get through A Course in Miracles. And how does that impact? And to me, I also at the time was looking into mysticism, and you know, it's all mysticism as I look at A Course in Miracles, and it aligns in many ways with what Christ said in his sermons. And I'm like, oh, this fits me. And it gave me the opportunity to work with all faiths, you know, because it's all one, right? It doesn't matter to me what faith you are or are not. You're a piece of the whole. We're all together in this oneness. And so I set up my own practice in Maryland as a ministerial counselor, which was my ordained ministerial counselor. And I got so busy, Clint, I had to trick people away. I mean, because it's something that, and I'm not going to say it was me, I'm saying the process is something that you often don't find, you know, that you can be Hindu, or you could be Jewish, or you could be Christian, or you could be an atheist and be in the same group, discussion group, and find out you have so much in common, you know. So I've loved it. I've worked with lots of families that, you know, where child abuse is very prevalent, and I work with their counselors or psychiatrists, and some of them refer their families to me because there's that missing element that in my mind is the acceptance of, you know, you're a divine creature, whatever word you want to use to describe Mother God, Father God, God. So it's been a wonderful journey. I just love it.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. And you're
Mhm.
just so positive, and that's just great. I mean,
Mhm.
it's great to listen to. You did mention A Course in Miracles, and I'm
Mhm.
certainly a big fan of that. When I first came across that, probably in my late 20s, it really kind of shifted me, and it kind of gave me a feeling of everything is safe and resting in God
Yes.
ultimately. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And what is there to be fearful of? I had another experience that validated A Course in Miracles for me when I was maybe in my 40s. I was rushed to the hospital. My colon was rupturing. This is not a good prognosis, you know? So in the hospital, in the emergency room, and there's this young physician who's taking care of me. And I had asked my husband, this was back when you had CDs to listen to. I said, bring me all of my Deepak Chopra CDs. I'm going to listen and see if I could find a place of peace. Well, I had an experience before they were getting ready to roll me in for the surgery, which little physician's telling my husband, this is very scary. I can't promise you anything. I have to miss all her organs. I mean, he's got himself all worked up, and then my husband is white, right? But while they're talking about that, and I'm listening to this Deepak, I wish I could remember the specific name of the CD I was listening to at the time. But it talks about the zero-ness, you know, what's in the zero, which is nothing, which is God. So I heard that and I had an experience. And it was so quick, quicker than that. But in that moment, I knew, oh, this is not true. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need any surgery. I'm just fine. And what was even more important was it didn't matter if I was fine, if I wasn't fine. I just knew I was. So I was trying to counsel the little doctor, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. I'm fine. It's no problem. And he's throwing his hands up in the air, and you know, so they roll me into the room where they were using the CAT scanner, I forget, whatever they were using, CAT scan, I guess, to guide them through the surgery. And he got so scared when he saw that everything was fine inside of me that he walked out. The nurses started singing praises to God. I was in an Adventist hospital at the time, and rolled me back to my room about healing and grace. But what was more profound for me was the understanding that it didn't matter. None of it mattered, because what mattered was the feeling I had, which is beyond words. I have tried and tried to describe it. When this healing occurred, I'm speechless. Bliss doesn't do it. peace doesn't do it. I didn't see a tunnel. I didn't see Christ at the end of it. I didn't see nothing. It was a knowingness, a feeling that I cannot put words on. And it stayed with me for months after that. And the thing that it enhanced was my psychic ability. I could had have clients walk into my office. I knew their story before they told me. I'd walk by a pregnant woman that didn't even show, and I knew she was pregnant with a boy, twins, a girl. I just knew things, and okay, what am I supposed to do with that? I don't know, you know? So, oh, I don't know, 8 months later or so, little by little, I kind of um, ended up back in this, as the course calls it, this dream that we live in. And I got depressed. I wanted to be back in that peaceful, beautiful, worryless. I know it's not a word, but you just wouldn't worry about anything at all. I wanted to be back there, and I couldn't get to that point again. So I had to work with myself on, okay, you had a glimpse. You need to be grateful that you had that glimpse, and then just, maintain your spiritual practice, and it's all as it should be. And all matter of things shall be fine, right? Norwich, is that her right quote? Norwich, Julian of Norwich, I think that's her quote. Makes sense to me that maybe we can't see it here, and it's because our sight is so limited. Maybe there's just so much more to it.
Yeah, yeah. When you were describing the zero and the
Yeah,
nothingness, I
yeah.
actually thought of Julian of Norwich
Uh-huh.
because she has writings about, the three nothings in which it's
Right.
contained everything. And so, yeah, and all shall be well. That's such a great, great quote.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm,
so how about, I'm interested kind of a little
yeah.
bit in this clairvoyance that was happening with you, because I've actually had the same thing open up in me at times,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't wanted it. It's been too much flooding in, and it's been too overwhelming. And I'm curious about your take on that.
I understand that experience, and I felt the same, especially when I'd have a new client walk in the door and I already knew their history. I felt like that was invasive of them, and would prejudice and bias me. I wouldn't tell them, I already know what happened to you, so no need to go through it. I would never dare do that. But I asked my therapist, very spiritual, how do I, what do I do with that? I feel like I'm invading their sense of self before they even have a chance to open up with me. I don't want it. And she said, you're going to have to look at it as a gift, because somewhere in their opening up, you will see why you were given that gift of knowing for that person. And I have found that to be true. But I understand how you don't want it, especially seeing the future sometimes. It's like you just, it's too much. It's a lot. So I wish I could say there, do this or that to let it be an easier experience for you, but I'm struggling with the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, but I do like the therapist's take that it is a gift, and
Mhm.
there's even biblical stuff that references the gifts of the Spirit.
That's right.
Um, let's see how we got some plenty of time left.
Mhm.
I'm curious if for listeners that haven't heard of A Course in Miracles, or they read it
Mm.
a long time ago and they forgot, could you run through it a little bit? I don't know if
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
want to do that.
I think that the first lines, if I can remember them correctly, that open up A Course in Miracles is really kind of summarize the entire course, but I can go into a little more. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. And herein lies the peace of God. So if you were to expand on that, nothing real can be threatened. I interpret to mean the remembrance of God. If you remember God, that is the only thing that's really real. The only thing that is actually real is God, is God. So nothing real can be threatened. It's going to be there. It's just there, and it's our acceptance of it. It's grace pouring into us that we get to see it. Excuse me, experience. Nothing real can be threatened, so why be fearful? Nothing unreal exists. Sin, evil, death. And I know that's blasphemy to a lot of people, but it is of this world, which of course often refers to as a dream, right? It's not real. If you can step aside, especially in today's world, all the conflict, I'm right, you're wrong, this side, that side, it just, if we buy into it, we lose all sense of peace. You know, we become very upset. I'm not saying we shouldn't stand up for what we believe in, and I'll get into that too, how that aligns with the Course of Miracles. But none of it's real. The only thing that is real is God. So, you know, that's a very confusing and conflicting way of viewing something. But if we think about it, the things that are unreal are the things that bring us fear, right? All this fear on the world right now, war, famine, all these things that just are so fearful to our hearts and our souls, you know? If we can rise above that and remember and come to some kind of understanding, if not a belief, that the only thing that's real is God. This is just what we're dreaming out. We had a nightmare going on right now. So then people will say, well, then what do we do? Just step back and let it happen? No. Course in Miracles says no one goes home without everyone going home. So we intervene in the world in ways that are not preachy, not evangelical, because I think, you know, in my mind, that pushes more people away or else makes them buy into the fearfulness more. So, you know, by being the light, what is it? The Buddha that said, be the light you wish to see in the world is is the way that you bring everybody home. And why can't one go home without the rest? Is because according to Course in Miracles, we are all one. As the sand is on the beach, is one beach. We are all one. So in a nutshell, I mean, that's a very slim explanation of A Course in Miracles. It's very Christ-centered, um, but Christ being the everything rather than perhaps the term Jesus. You know, Jesus is Christ, but the Christ is more than Jesus, you know. So understanding that is challenging. And that's why A Course in Miracles will give you the daily lessons and tell you only do one a day because it's an awful lot to take in, right? It's, you know, and it's a gradual thing, and I've heard it referred to as brainwashing. And I will just say, and I love a lot of things about Catholicism. There's a lot of things I still carry with me and I hang on to because they, to me, are beautiful, such as the Virgin Mary. The Mother Mary is the way I prefer to refer to her. The saints, I have a right to the saints if I am not, even if I'm not a practicing Catholic. I have a right to a lot of things in a lot of the great scriptures. So, you know, thinking that A Course in Miracles is kind of anti a particular religion just doesn't make sense to me because it's so open and accepting and freeing. Does that help?
That helps tremendously. I couldn't have said it better myself, and it's good for me to get a refresher too on it because
Mm-hmm.
it was a while ago I went through it, but I had some interesting peak experiences with it as well. So
I'd love
that's,
to hear that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I yeah, I will tell you a little bit.
Mhm.
When I was kind of like, 13, 14, I experienced a soul loss, as they often talk about in indigenous traditions, where
Mm.
you kind of lose a chunk of your deep bodily presence. Maybe you
Mm.
don't ultimately lose anything, but it was a big chunk that used it. And when I went through A Course in Miracles, I kind of had this automatic soul retrieval where my soul shot through my crown chakra all the way to the base of the feet. and I felt different than I ever had before since about age 13. And I felt that, and it was that safety that A Course in Miracles gave me. It was that sense of safety of like, you're safe now.
Right.
And so it came back, and I don't exactly understand it. I've certainly read Michael Harner and some of the other writers about shamanism, and I've even met with shamans talking about it. But it happened with A Course in Miracles. So I don't really need to understand it perfectly. I just need to know that A Course in Miracles graced me with just a heightened sense of being in this
Mm.
world. And yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. It could be a much longer story, and it'll probably be in my second book, which I'm writing
Mm.
now.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah. So A
Yeah,
Course in Miracles is just great. It's just great. Sometimes it's a little hard to wrap your mind around exactly what
I know.
it's saying, but I think those first two lines at the beginning are really kind of all you really need right
That's
there.
all you need. I mean, it describes it totally. And the thing I love about it as well is it claims that it's not the book for everyone. It's not the way for everyone. And when I heard that, I went, okay, because the belief that I grew up with is you were this or you're going to hell. You were this. Growing up in a Catholic school, you were either Catholic or you were going to go to hell. You weren't going to make it. So, overcoming that black-white kind of thinking is really helpful. So when I open a course and see, oh, this may not be for everyone, but if it's for you, you're going to know it. I thought, okay, that's, great. I'll tell you a funny story. When I entered therapy, I was still a practicing Catholic, very practicing Catholic, more out of obedience, I'd have to say. Um, and just that's what I've always done. And why would you challenge what you've always done kind of mentality? But in therapy, my therapist encouraged me to go to a Unitarian church around the corner from where we lived at the time in this beautiful little chapel. So as a good Catholic girl, I got there 15 minutes early. I had my high heels on and a dress. And I wandered in the little chapel and no one's there. And I'm like looking at my watch. I go back outside, look at the sign. Yeah, service at 10:30. I'm like, there's no one here. Something's wrong. So I went back in. I sat in the very back pew, as far in the back as I possibly could. Because, Sister Mary Terracine used to tell me the roof's going to fall in if you go into a non-Catholic church. So I was like full of fear. So I'm telling you, 10:30 on the dot, this place just got crowded. People in jeans, drinking coffee, which was very foreign to me, talking to each other. And then the service started, and they all stood up and sang Amazing Grace, and I could not stop crying. And people were hugging me and drying my tears. And I'm like, the roof didn't fall in, and I'm actually finding acceptance of all kinds of people in this little church. So I survived my first attempt at moving away into something broader. And I laugh at myself now. It was quite the story for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You have such a good story and such a good recovery from
Yeah.
the trauma, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful and reassuring to hear. I think it will help many of our listeners for sure. I mean, it's really good, I guess. You describe all these experiences in your book. Maybe talk
Yeah.
a little bit about your book. Give it a plug.
Sure. Oh, you're sweet. Sure. Broken Water is the title. Broken Water, an extraordinary true story. It's done better than I could have ever imagined. And I'm assuming it's because it's a universal story. Child abuse throughout the world is just unthinkably large an occurrence. I mean, the numbers of children that experience abuse, neglect, poverty, um, it's astronomical and not necessary and unheard of. And I think because of that, Broken Water has found its way internationally and is selling pretty well. It's had some pretty major coverage in media, which has been a gift. And I will just tell you, Clint, I get up every morning and I say to whatever higher power is there, I'm here, do with me what you will, and I'll do it. And that's the philosophy I carried through the entire process of 15 years gathering my sister's stories. Like, which sister should I see first, as I shared with you. So it's out there, it's everywhere. If someone would want to learn about me and what I do, they can find me on my website, barbaralane.info. Barbaralane.info. The book Broken Water is everywhere, Amazon. You can get it at some libraries. Bookstores either have it or will order it for you. So I'm touched by the response I'm getting, the emails I'm getting, individuals saying, religious or not, it touched a part of them they were unable to heal. And that's the goal. And all 10 of my sisters stepped up to share their stories, all of them, in the hopes that our stories would provide inspiration and motivation and hope for others who have grown up in these kinds of situations, because we all, every one of us, experienced horrid child abuse. Now, how can it be 11 girls in one family, all had the same experiences? And so the power in that to come together, all 11 of us, and tell our stories is phenomenal. I'm proud of them.
Fantastic. That's great.
Mhm.
So I guess as we kind of, you've thrown out a lot here. Do you want to, kind of have some final points and some takeaways or other spiritual teachers that have influenced you too? I mean, obviously you've read a lot of books, so I'm kind of curious. Yeah, why don't you give a brief mention of that? What are some of the spiritual teachers? Obviously,
Okay.
you mentioned the Catholic mystics and saints. Are there any
Mhm.
others
I
that,
would,
yeah, go
sure.
ahead.
I would say anyone delving into healing would benefit from beginning with Louise Hay, who experienced tremendous abuse in her childhood as well. And look what she did with that. And, Heal Your Life, or You Can Heal Your Life, I think was her very first book. And her story of getting that out there is pretty phenomenal. So, the Hay House has tremendous teachers, and you can look at the ones that have even passed, Wayne Dyer and such are authors I read during my healing that helped me put one foot in front of the other. But I think following Hay House, if you want to have this spiritual course, the mystics, of course, I'm just beginning another journey through the mystics, which I did years ago and then have forgotten so much. But for me, I'm starting with Julian of Norwich, and then I'm going to Hildegard. For me, to study the feminine mystics, I think is a very powerful avenue. But to find therapy, and if you find a therapist that doesn't resonate, or they're too clinical or this and that, don't stop. Look for another one, either a mentor or a clergy member or a religious leader that resonates with you. Be careful of cults, but someone that can resonate with your heart and your soul. Um, it's so worth the journey. It's so worth the struggle to get through it. So that's what I'd recommend.
Great, great. That's a lot of good
Mhm.
insight and advice, and I would certainly agree with everything you've said. And thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's
You're
just,
so welcome.
yes, it's just a story of hope and the miraculous, and you've had that kind of North Star of God always with you.
I really have. I've been so blessed. And grace falls upon you if you're open to it, is my experience of it. It's there for everyone. God is not specific on who he'll bless. He, she, it.
Right, right. Don't get tripped up by semantics.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Clint. It was wonderful to share this story. And I hope you're blessed and happy. And you've got a lifelong follower now with me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you
Okay.
for being a part of the Contemplative Light community.
You're welcome.
Many blessings to you.
Thank you.